Hello, everybody. Welcome along to the Event Industry News podcast. My name is James Dixon, and as ever, I wish you a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever or wherever you tune in to today's podcast from. And on today's episode, I suppose it's a slightly different take on something that we have discussed recently, and more will become apparent as we introduce and welcome today's podcast guest. One Industry, One Voice, the coalition of associations and businesses created to champion the entire events industry, has been evolved and rebranded the Power of Events UK. The recently formed collaborative not-for-profit organisation has been built on the back of OIOV, which was launched in July 2020 to represent 7 core event industry sectors. So, what's changed? Why has it happened? And to tell us a little bit more about it is today's guest, founder of the organisation, Rick Stainton. Rick, welcome to the Event Industry News podcast.
Oh, thanks, James. Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. And hopefully I've sort of maybe given a teaser there of what's happened. And I'm sure you would like to dive straight in and tell us in more detail what it is, how it's evolved. So maybe we do this chronologically. Do we maybe take a step back, first of all, to July 2020 and look at why and how the original organisation was created?
Yeah, great shout. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody, as James said. Back in, looking back now, which is a bit bizarre, on the COVID hell that we all went through as an industry, there were a lot of campaigns. There was a lot of lobbying of government and media. There was a lot of event professionals in survival mode, and the associations mostly did some great work in championing their own sectors, their own members' challenges, issues, and were effectively putting together a lot of campaigns to do so. Hashtags were flying around all over the place, and there was quite a lot of sort of noise amongst a lot of event professionals to potentially do this in a slightly more coordinated, collaborative way. And I think we were just combating 25, 30 plus years of institutionalized approach to the events industry, which has very much focused quite sort of in an insular way in a lot of areas on their own sectors and their own operation. And I just felt, and I queried to many of my peers and competitors and other association heads and industry leaders that I knew, and just said, look, do you think there's something in maybe forming some voluntary, informal, collaborative, effectively on Zoom, to try and get all these sort of different associations and industry leaders that were championing these different campaigns just to talk to each other, to share, to collaborate, because surely, together we're stronger. And if we coordinated the timing, the messaging, maybe some of the data that was flying around that was very sort of contradictory, that might sort of help each individual campaign not perhaps trip over each other and help each other. And I suggested it, and I got a 99.9% great idea. And good luck with trying to get everyone to work together and talk to each other. So I then went on sort of a diplomatic crusade, one for a better expression. I got Simon Hughes, chair of the BVP at the time, to help me with it very much and lead it from a grown-up perspective anyway. And I just got on the phone and Zoom to effectively thousands, if I'm honest, of people and organisations from sort of June up until very recently, end of 2021. And I'm very happy to say that everyone was brilliant and realised that we're all in the same sort of boat. So we had representatives from, I think, a lot of, if not all, as many as we could, of the core associations. And before I even did that, I just defined what sectors I felt were part of the events industry. So it came down to, and there are still grey lines, but it's the best that I could come up with, 7 sectors, which effectively was corporate events and experiential consumer, bespoke sport activations, exhibitions, private events and weddings, music, live music, outdoor event sector and festivals, sort of third sector and government sector events. And they very much form part of the coalition. So we got all the main associations sort of adopting that, and it was very powerful. We managed to, through Zoom, effectively for almost 18 months, just share what they were doing, when they were doing it, with what sort of data, who they were targeting, whether it's in media or government. And it could only be a positive, and it was only meant to be a positive sort of initiative to see if we could all help each other at the time when everyone was in a very strange place. So that was the background. And then really up to towards the end of last year, a lot of people were sort of saying, well, where's One Insta One Voice going to go? We did the We Create Experience campaigns to try and get all the sectors to sort of together in sort of some videos. We got lots of celebs together. You may have seen them on the One Insta One Voice .co.uk website. We did a B2B video and a B2C video with a lot of celebs just shouting about the positive impact messaging for social benefit, community benefit, mental and health, physical well-being, the economy, and how much we all wish that live would come back as soon as safely possible to do so. So when it came to sort of the end of last year, Simon and I put our heads together over a few drinks and effectively realized that we maybe had something here that had some legacy and longevity. So again, we put together a deck, and I reached out to all those amazing hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations and individual supporters who put a few quid in very gratefully and very humbly and very generously to the We Create Experiences campaign, and supported it through action groups and the task force. And I just presented to them over the first 3 months of this year, did seminars, online webinars. I met quite a few people across the 4 nations, across all the sectors, industry leaders and association heads, and said, look, this is a plan. Do we take One Insta One Voice into something new that has a proper governance structure, a proper organization behind it, actually they're listed on Companies House, etc., with a sort of directorship and a framework, funded, and with a clear mandate and mission. And again, I put it together, and we learned a lot of lessons over the last year, 18 months, of perhaps the way to do this, to not step on anybody's toes and duplicate and create, certainly not creating another association. No one needs that. And just have a very simple and clear mandate to support all event professionals across the 4 nations, fully inclusive and diverse and representative across the 7 main sectors, to showcase the power of events effectively. And so we decided from the feedback that was a very good idea. No one felt that it wasn't needed. Everyone bought into it. And so we set up, 3 weeks ago now, the Power of Events as a limited company by guarantee. So effectively a not-for-profit. We've started to enhance now our press releases to announce that to everybody, which is very gratefully you guys have picked up.
Absolutely, and they are already out there for people to read about. I think we're recording this for context on the 16th of May. On a Monday afternoon, and so obviously we will try and publish this podcast and get it out there as soon as possible. But there are already, this is by no means an exclusive. We're grateful to talk to you today, but the message is already out there. I've searched for it this morning, and it's already out there on some of the news websites, which is fantastic. And I suppose going to the genesis of it, this is something that we've actually talked about on this podcast just recently. And have done so over the past 18 months or so, about the shock to the system that the events industry as a whole was given because of the pandemic. And we work in a diverse industry that contains a lot of different vertical markets and industries within industries. And there's no other industry like the one that we term the events industry. I can't think of any sort of comparable industries or marketplaces where there are so many different sectors within a sector of its own. And with that goes the complication that historically the sector has had, which is all of these different trade associations representing different elements of the industry. And until that shock to the system came along, which was the COVID pandemic, there had never really been this need and requirement for that joined up thinking to take place. But as you alluded to, it's so important, because it could look foolish, couldn't it, if you've got different people putting out different messages and contradictory statements and things, when ultimately what we were all trying to do during that pandemic is do what you created, which was create one voice.
Well, I agree with you, and I disagree with you. I think it was desperately needed, but we were having a relatively good time, in the sort of 17, 18, 19, 2018, 2019. It was pretty much a buoyant market. And when you're really busy, this perhaps is deemed to be, less prevalent, less of importance. People don't have the time or the resource to do anything about it. Though, to be fair, the likes of the BVP has combined a lot of the sort of the corporate and some of the one or two other sort of outdoor sectors under a sort of a collaborative. Live was set up quite recently to do the music side. You've got this sort of the EIF doing it on the outdoor side. So there were pockets, I say pockets, that's probably unfair. There were some decent initiatives happening, but a lot of them in itself weren't talking to each other. And then there was a huge amount of others that weren't. So I think you're right. What happened was the pandemic created a massive spark and a catalyst to what was needed for many, many years. I mean, we can go back to SOC codes and SIC codes and being just officially recorded, which I'm not going down that route today. Don't get me wrong.
No.
But that's been, discussed and needed for decades. If certainly in the last decade, it's been, championed a lot by a number of associations to encourage associations to record their employment and their results and so on under those codes officially. But this is bigger. This is a holistic overview to showcase the power of events. With a balance between the clarity of what we're about. As you say, we're a very convoluted, joined, not so much joined up, almost immature industry in a way, where we're just bolted on and sectors of joined sectors, as you say, and the subsectors. But effectively, we are all delivering amazing experiences and content to audiences in a live environment, and that is what binds us together. And I'll tell you what, the other thing that binds us together, whether you're doing corporate audience or consumer audience, whether you're sort of a rights holder, a promoter, whether you are delivering on behalf of a brand or a sports entity or a music entity or a private individual, we are all sharing. The vast majority of the industry sectors are the production partners, and we all share them, whether they're freelance, AV companies, caterers, venues, talent, infrastructure, marquees. I could go on. They often work across all the sectors, and that's the vast majority of organizations and people in this industry. So it's weird that we don't recognize that we're all part of something that is so interlinked, because perhaps often we're delivering to different audiences from a different agency or promoter or rights holder perspective. But the vast majority of the activation is shared with the larger sector supply chain, from very small individual sole traderships and freelancers to sort of larger organizations. So I just wanted to communicate that and remind people that, if we actually work together, the power of what we've got, the thousands of businesses, the tens and tens of billions of GDP, the million plus employed people, we don't even know what those numbers are. And that's the embarrassing thing for me. And that's the opportunity as well for everybody to benefit from. So, so now the Power Event is all about showcasing, exactly that. And it's really about, the recognition to external audiences, and internally, it's about respecting it, and it's about valuing it. So, those sound three bold words, but, the press, the media, the public generally through the media, and even perhaps you could say the government, and I'll just make it very clear, the Power Events is a completely, party agnostic, non-lobbying organisation. We'll leave that hard work to the associations who are a lot better at it and have a lot of great contacts across the Treasury and Bays and DCMS. We're just trying to facilitate and help their work. But any external stakeholder or any internal event professional needs to understand they're part of a bigger entry, because it helps them understand what they're part of, how they can develop their careers, their networks, their connections. Also, if we showcase in one comms website hub the power of events and create that map of those 7 sectors and that sort of chain, as I said, of sort of sports right holders to operators to the supply chain, new talent can really see how amazing events are as a career opportunity, and the multiple different opportunities they've got to work in different genres, different audiences, different types of sectors, and the variety of different skill sets that perhaps they didn't recognize were part of the events industry makeup. So it's all about that sort of, that very much that understanding and that respect and that sort of value that we place in ourselves. And I think we haven't done ourselves a great service in the past, because we haven't perhaps backed it up with the other main mission of us, one with Power of Events, which is data. If we can't succinctly say what each sector is worth and then come up with that big number, I mean, we tried to do the best of a bad thing a few years ago, where we came up with this 84 billion, which was combining the best of numbers we had and 1.5 million split between the consumer and business audiences as employees, I should say. But it's not quite good enough. And so we just need to answer some very simple questions to back up the more sort of emotional and framework map of our industry in one place. So we are aiming to do that. And we can get on to obviously how we're going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd scribbled here literally just a few seconds before you said that. You know, I've written here figures ? We don't know. Just picking up on something that you said, which is that, you know, we don't know, embarrassingly, what the exact figures are. And like I said, we pulled certain figures based on what information we did have. And I was going to ask you, is that a key objective of the organisation going forward, which you've clearly said that it is. And I wonder as well, just as a sort of a slight tangent to that, I've always felt that across the wider industry there is sometimes a disconnect between people who may not even consider themselves to work in the events industry, which may sound strange, but I'm talking at the sort of the scale of things in your day-to-day hotels, you know, business conferences that are, you know, little conferences that are going into hotel facilities, and the events manager who helps to coordinate those. I see those sort of, you know, regional and, you know, very sort of provincial event venues hosting stuff every day, and a lot of that is the bread and butter for me as a freelancer. I can go in as a one-man freelancer with some AV equipment and some production experience and help support them and earn a good living at doing it. But I know for a fact that some of the people that work in those venues wouldn't consider themselves to be in the events industry if you ask them. And I kind of think, how much information are we missing out on by them not understanding and being fully aware of the fact that they are contributing to this bigger entity? You know, they will look at some of the stuff that's happening for the Queen's Jubilee, music festivals, huge scale trade shows, and think, well, no, that's way out of my league. That's not what we do. But it is, and it's really important that we know what they're doing and that they are they understand that they are contributing, even if it's in a small way, to a bigger industry.
Yeah, 100%. You know, there are small community events, charity participation events, through to the big, you know, the largest events, perhaps, you know, the London Marathon, through to some of the largest festivals, some of the sort of tens of thousands of people that attend the large trade shows in Manchester or Glasgow or London or whatever, through to, you know, the sort of the music concerts, you know, the experiential activations and product launches that we do on the corporate brand side. They're all delivering amazing live experiences, content for a variety of audiences. And most of the supply chain is exactly as you say. You know, I've spoken to so many AV companies and venues and freelancers over the last year or two, a lot of them which have very brilliantly become supporters of One Industry, One Voice, and hopefully now the power of events. And they work across all the sectors. I've spoken to a freelancer, I think it was about a year ago. They have worked at large scale private events and weddings, through to exhibitions. A month later, they were helping with a bespoke mass participation sports event. They've worked at festivals. They've done product launches in the UK and overseas for corporate brands. And they all just see that as part of their events delivery sector job. Now, that's not, you know, that's not everybody, but most of the supply chain and support partners who are effectively the beating heart of our event delivery do feel that they're part of more than just one individual sector. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. We can get torn up in the background and the past and the theory behind it. What matters is if we don't have a showcase of somewhere to point people to, just to learn the overview of our industry as we've defined it as best we can, the 7 sectors, the makeup of it and the support organizations around it, we're never going to basically get lots of things, including the best talent attracted from other industries coming into our industry, seeing the scope of opportunity, the talent coming out of universities and academia and colleges that probably are looking at the last 2 years going, that's potentially the worst industry I could walk into because it's been so scarred. Quite the opposite. In most sectors, not all, in most, it's recovering brilliantly and it's adapted and it's evolving and it's even more fit for purpose than it was in the past.
And there's a real positivity and optimism as well.
There's still a long way to go for some areas, to be fair, into 2023, but some areas are really flying and others will recover at a slower pace, but are. And we need to showcase and get that talent back, because we all know how much of a capacity and resource issue we have with having unfortunately lost some brilliant talent and companies because of the COVID impact. But also, you know, the media and the government don't treat us with the respect that we deserve, with the amount of employment, innovation, support for communities, physical and well-being, the charity events that we do, the largest, most watched, both on broadcast or social media, as well as live events. They're all backed up with the events industry expertise, whether it's in sports or music or corporate or exhibitions or whatever. You know, the ironic thing is the two big things that were focused on last year of G7 and COP, vast majority of that skill set was delivered by us. You've got Platinum Jubilee that was on last night. You know, even in the credits, you could see some amazing companies that supported it. You've got the Commonwealth Games coming up. You know, I met up with the London Marathon events guys a few weeks ago. And, you know, they are delivering some phenomenal stuff coming up later this year, as well as the likes of Ride London and Vitality, just a few Vitality event race in London a few weeks ago. And they all feel in their own way that they're part of it. And the reason they think that is because they know that a massive crew behind them are the events industry. They may not consider at the top end that that's their prime sort of message, their sport or their music, but they're part of a wider network and framework that basically enables them to activate. And that's really important. And also it links back to the government and the media. Without that recognition of the scope and backed up by the proper credible data, they'll never stop treating us perhaps in a similar size and ilk as other comparative industries or even smaller industries that have better relations with government, to supporting the associations to do that, as I said, is very important. And the media, I mean, God, the press that the events and Partygate and all that has had over the last few years has been so damaging. But even before COVID, the media never really got us. They never understand our impact, as I say, on innovation, well-being, exports, employment. They just deemed that sort of most events a bit of a jamboree, a bit of a jolly, whether you're in a suit or you're not, whether in a field or in a building. And that's a little bit sad. And it's half our own fault for not communicating it better, and also not engaging with the media better. But most of the time, if you're not giving them the direct content and data to compare us to and bolster up more than just an emotional, subjective view on it, we sort of got to look at ourselves and wonder whether we've done ourselves a lot of favors in the past. Because the perception versus the reality couldn't be more stark. And the reality is we know we're delivering for the biggest brands, the biggest audience, the biggest music, sporting events, biggest exhibitions, whatever it might be. We're world class. We're the best in the world at this.
Absolutely,
you know?
100%.
And why the hell then don't we have that respect and that understanding at both media and government level, but also then the talent that need to recognize that they'll be part of something so exciting going into the next decade.
Yeah, and you're making my job easy today, Rick, because I've written stuff down and I've scribbled it. I put Jubilee. You know, once again we're showcasing the best. You know, this goes back to any major event in the UK, be it the Olympic Games 10 years ago. You know, various Queen's Jubilees over the last few decades as events and celebrations have got bigger and better, understandably, the longer that this particular monarch has been on the throne. But like you said, Commonwealth Games, we have these things where every few years there seems to be a spotlight and a sort of a worldwide media attention on the UK because something is happening in this country. And inevitably, we showcase how to do it as best as it can possibly be done. And I was watching the Jubilee celebration last night on the TV, and I thought, wow, what a well-coordinated, brilliantly produced, well-delivered, engaging piece of television and event theatre. And I thought exactly what you did. You know, how many thousands of people, thousands of hours, weeks, months, years of preparation and planning have gone into that, because that would have been planned whilst everybody was in the thick of the pandemic. People have been working furiously on pre-production, and we must shout about it more so than once every few years when they come along.
But in the end of the day, the audience will only see the end product, and you never really see any of the events industry, people-wise anyway, in an end product.
Correct.
The vast majority is hidden, because that's how brilliant we are. We're sort of in the shadows, turning the cogs and doing all the back end work. We know that 99.9% of event management is planning and coordination and logistics and budgeting and meticulous health and safety approach and coordination of show calling and all that sort of great and creative, innovative ideas. That all happens in the ether. What everyone sees is the little shiny package at the end with a bow, probably with some celebs or well-known people, on a stage that they would never, like I last night was looking at the lighting and the staging, the coordination of the calling, the coordinating thousands and hundreds of different performers and horses and dogs and go on. I mean, you know, my hat comes off to them, but us in the events industry would think about that. I'm not that sure many viewers and the general public or government media or whatever would be thinking of that. I'm just thinking it just happens. Well, it's about time people realised that we're the best in the world at something, and that's making that happen.
I'd love to see the behind the scenes of last night.
Oh, I
I'd
mean,
love to have
bonkers,
seen
right?
a 10 camera crew just standing next to some of the callers, some of the floor managers, some of the
Yeah,
people who were in the wings, telling people to get on stage now because bang, that second
it
was
was
being
phenomenal.
coordinated with, 10 different lighting guys and 50 camera people. It's absolutely amazing. It's the most brilliantly choreographed dance you'll ever see, and you don't see it.
But if you don't expose it in a very sort of objective way with data to back it up and numbers, that's what most people resonate with. Nice pictures and imagery are very important and half the story, and that's what the new comms site that we're going to launch in the coming months will showcase. But then the research program, which is the balance of what we're also doing, which we can get onto in a minute with the universities around the Four Nations, that'll back up all that really subjective content with the data, which will showcase what's behind the delivery of those amazing experiences. And if we balance those two together, the media will start, hopefully, if we get it right, understand just the depth and creativity married with research and insight married with outputs of trade, delivery and exports and tax receipts and so on. Boring stuff, but incredibly important if you're going to get the message across of a grown-up industry. And more importantly than that, the government only care about the latter. And we can help associations in their missions and their own research projects and support them with our research partnerships, then as well as our own that holistic big numbers and so on. We'll get onto the research in a minute, I'm sure, but then we are doing ourselves a lot more favors because all the ingredients are there. We just haven't put them up into a portal where the one place you can point people to discover and network through a map of our industry with those both imagery and data meshed together, hopefully.
Well, you mentioned three things effectively that we need to touch on, and I know that time is tight for you today, Rick. But we will rattle through the university's research new com site. Let's park new com site for a bit because I'm sure that will be a nice way to end things, because then we can also direct people to the website and to find out what's happening at the moment. So let's look at universities research. How do those two things tie in together? Do they tie in together, or are they two separate entities in terms of your own objectives?
Well, to put that in perspective, actually, I will mention the comms website because it's not up and running yet. I mean, thepowerofevents.org is purely just a holding page, and on that holding page is the deck of our plan. So if you want to learn about this plan in more detail with the process of what we're going through, but ultimately that will showcase the map of the industry, be able to network through it, navigate through it, and anybody's either an existing event professional or a new event professional, an external stakeholder, be able to get this showcase. That's mission number one. The reason I mentioned that, which will come in the coming months, is then we're going to launch a microsite stroke app, which we encourage all event professionals to download, so that when we need to talk and have two-way engagement, they ask us, how do I find out? Where do I network through? I want to learn more about, so on. We can help them and point them to the right areas. But the real function of the app is the research, because if we can get thousands and thousands and tens of thousands and plus across the sectors accessing the app across the Four Nations, then when we form this university partnerships, which we've contacted the top 10 event faculties across the Four Nations. We currently have conversations, very positive ones, almost there with signing on sort of a partnership memorandum of understanding, which we sent out a week or so ago. With one in Northern Ireland, 2 in Scotland, 2 in Cardiff, and 5 in England. And they're the top event faculties. There might be 1 or 2 others. We're just waiting to see whether they recommend. But they will form a research partnership from an event faculty perspective. And we will then go out to all sorts of different grant funding opportunities like Innovate UK. I've had some brilliant conversations with them recently because we, in inverted commas, tick a lot of their measurement indicator boxes for funding, i.e. engaging new talent, digital platform, linking academia and industry together, showcasing a sector in its best light. I mean, that's everything what they're about. So we're very excited about that. We'll get hopefully funding to support the organisation operation, but more importantly as well, the research side. And then ESRC, the Arts Council, British Academy, there's loads of grant application competitions, which these universities have had great success in, something just like this, either individually or collaboratively in recent years. So we're very positive about combining us all together and pitching for those grant applications to support different research work packages. So those 10 universities will work alongside the power events and start answering these questions in a really robust and credible way, which then everybody can share and benefit in, whether you're an association, you're teaching students, you're trying to encourage more investment in your business, you're trying to be more infrastructure in your region or your city from an events perspective. You know, generally communicating with media and so on, we'll have some robust data, simply answering the question, what size are we? Where do you work? In what sectors? What expertise? What's your background? You know, and for some organizations, what's your export value and what's your turnover? I mean, we don't even have that. And if we can get somewhere close to that, then several other over time, you know, next year onwards, the research partnership momentum will look at sustainability, diversity, inclusion, and equity, regional impact, sector-specific impact. You know, whether it's focusing on, you know, what's the benefit of the events industry to Manchester from a corporate events perspective, if you want to take it down several sort of channels, examples. And the way that the research universities will help us is the way that they help design the questions and the drop down opportunity of boxes to respond, literally as simple as possible on the app, with the way that they can slice and dice this information for the benefit of different regions, different sectors, different audiences. And if that all gets workable, then we start putting ourselves on a pedestal that is respected and understood and properly valued, and that's got to benefit every event professional, right?
Yeah, 100%. And interestingly, again, you may wildly disagree with me on this one, but certainly go back a few years ago, maybe when I started the podcast for Event Industry News, maybe 7-8 years ago. I sense whenever you raise the subject of universities and event management degrees and things like that, there was almost like an old school snobbery within the events industry of, oh, you can't teach somebody in an academic situation how to do our job. We've been grafting for years, you know, running miles of cable or erecting fences or putting trackway down or building stages. You can only learn on the job. And I like to think, and I hope that sort of little bit of snobbery about whether or not you can learn the events industry in 3 years. We know you can't, but that little bit of snobbery hopefully is creeping out. And if you look at any other industry, major business industry, having the backing of academia, having universities doing research about a particular industry, you know, whether it be pharmaceutical or construction or whatever, it may, that's seen as a really good thing to have that academic backup to what you're doing within day-to-day activity. And I think that's a great link up that you guys appear to be pushing.
I totally agree. Whether it's the academia and the universities have not properly engaged with the industry in the right way, the courses haven't been practical enough and more theory, I don't know. But there's a lot of views out there, which I think we're all aware of. Whether it's the fact that industry haven't taken the time to properly help shape the courses and engage properly with academia, I don't know. Some have, some haven't. But generally, it's not good enough on both parts, you know. And I don't think anyone's going to dispute that there's a lovely marriage made in heaven over the last couple of decades on that basis. Now, we're not going to start shaping better relationships and course design and so on in the short term. However, certainly a massive byproduct of this relationship on the research side should be, you know, major heads of major faculties and course leaders engaging more with industry leaders and all sorts of different levels of industry, not just the leaders, but, you know, the individuals actually doing the hard graft, the work, the producers, you know, the projecos, the logistics people, the creatives, the freelancers and so on, and learning more about what they're doing day to day, which they can filter back into the courses and the content that they're delivering to students and manage their expectations that they're not going to run Glastonbury next year having graduated, which is what most of them historically may have been, exactly, you know, and the wider opportunities within the sector. And conversely, industry will have a, you know, look, we're all, what's our number one mission here is certain perceived founders of businesses or leaders. It's got to be leaving the industry in a better place than you found it, right? And surely one of those legacies could be that if through this, by natural osmosis, universities and academics and course leaders understand better what the industry is about going forward, and my God, it's been disrupted and evolved and changed in the last 2 years more than it has in the last 20 years, then that can filter through back into making courses more relevant, more attractive, and attract the best talent from the UK across 4 nations, as well as international students, which are a huge part, frankly, of a lot of the event management course makeup, which is brilliant. Much more diverse backgrounds, the number of different student courses I've engaged with and done presentations. I'm a visiting fellow at Surrey, for example. And when I've done webinars with them, it's frankly a hell of a lot more diverse and respectful to different backgrounds than perhaps the industry is generally at the moment. And that's something we can benefit and learn from and showcase going forward, creating a lot more future-proofed and relevant and appropriate makeup of our industry from a talent, expertise, background perspective. And that just really excites me as a sort of natural byproduct of the main research partnership that we were setting up. So yeah, totally agree with you on all fronts.
No, I appreciate that, and I wasn't expecting you to come straight back with I agree. Everybody's got a slight difference of opinion, but I do think that it is a symbiotic relationship in other industries between academia and day-to-day operations and what's happening in an industry. And I think that it is one that clearly has huge room for growth in our own industry, and it really sounds like you guys are I suppose just as tip of the iceberg, really, this initial consultation with those 10 universities that fingers crossed translates over time, short, medium and long term, into some real progress on that front. And just on that note, please come on and keep us updated. I know that you're pushed for time today, but in terms of getting messages across and getting out to the wider industry, Event Industry News is a platform that serves the whole of the events industry, regardless of those sort of 7 sectors that you've helped to define through the organization. So this is an open invite. Come on and tell us how things are progressing. We'd love to hear from you as this journey continues, and I'm sure that people who tune into this will have their own feedback. And I think before we wrap up, Rick, it's really important, let's just recap the website, because as you said, it's a bit of a holding sort of site at the moment, but that deck is on there. I'm going to put the website on the screen for anybody who's watching the video version of this, but if you're listening to the audio, thepowerofevents.org is where you need to go. Look at that deck that Rick explained is on there at the moment. It's applicable to anybody, regardless of what you do in the industry. It's obvious from talking to Rick today that input is required from all aspects, isn't it?
100%. If you want to email hello@thepowerofevents.org, we'd love to hear your views. We'd love to hear help. We need help. We need people to join some action groups we've got across comms, content, digital, funding, research, and anyone. It's a completely inclusive and open welcome, because this is not about me or Simon or anyone individually or any one organization. We're just trying to facilitate a growing mass movement that has huge impact for the benefit of everyone. That only works if other people get involved, small, medium and large businesses, individual freelance communities and so on. And just to your point, yes, the website is a holding page. We've got a digital agency being commissioned a few weeks ago to start working up the wireframe for a splash page, which we launch the next few months, and a new brand, an image and logo, which we launch hopefully in the next month or so. And then things, of course, I'll keep you updated. And again, yourself and Adam have been amazing with support over the last few years in a very sort of non-partisan way with other areas of the industry press. And thank you for that. And may that continue going forward, because if everyone feels and adopts that mandate, then everyone's going to hear about this and the progression and journey of it over the coming months and hopefully support it.
Well, you're very welcome, first of all. And I think just looking at my notes from today, you mentioned app download and getting that app out there and into the hands of people who can start inputting some of this data that we hope is going to have a real big impact. Very, very quickly before we finish, Rick, is there a time scale at the moment as to when you would like to have that app available? And maybe that would be a good opportunity to get you back on the podcast, hopefully later on this year when that app is ready to go and we can shout about it.
Yeah, I mean, the timescales are pretty simple from my point of view. We're hoping to get the university partners signed up in the next 3 or 4 weeks. We've got funding open at the moment with a $100,000 budget. We've got almost half of that actually after a week of launching, which is amazing. And we'll be continuing to encourage supporters and people that don't know us to just email us and say they're happy to support. Organisations are asking a minimum of £500. It's quite a lot of giving more than that. It's very difficult times though. So, if it's individual freelancers, someone who just want to give a few quid if they can spare it, amazing. Don't worry if you can't. I'm sure we can help in other ways. The timescales for the brand and the splash page to be launched is probably going to be early July. And then the main app and the main website with all the content we're looking at around September. So that's where we're sort of pushing for that with the research, hopefully competition applications for Innovate UK and others happening in the background conclusively, and hopefully start launching the research towards the end of the year.
Well, that's brilliant. Well, I'll say now, and I'll stick my neck out and say that we look forward to seeing you in back on the podcast in sort of September time, once the summer event season is done and dusted.
Exactly.
Although, as everybody will know, it's a 365 event season for anybody who works in the industry. There's no such thing as just the summer season.
No.
Let's speak again in September and see where things are, Rick. It's been great to speak to you today.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it, James.
No problem. If you are watching this already on the eventindustrynews.com website, hello to you. Don't forget to have a little click around and look at some of the latest news, features and supplements from all of those different sectors of the events industry that Rick has alluded to today. And of course, if you are already listening to this on the event on one of your podcast platforms, good afternoon to you. You can go over to the website and check out those latest news, features and supplements. And if you're already there, you can find us on wherever you get your podcasts from. Just search for the Event Industry News podcast. And if you've got anything that you would like to add to today's conversation relevant to what Rick's been talking about, at Event News Blog is us on Twitter. You'll find us on all the other social media platforms. Please do feel free to have your say, and let's find out what maybe you'd like to see happening in the coming months. And Rick, we'll speak to you again in September. It's been great to see you today. Thanks very much.
Take care. Thanks very much, guys.
See you soon, everybody.